we're talking about future employment. Looking at the World Economic Forum numbers, we realize that by 2030, 15% of the world's working age population will be in Africa. So it's interesting to hear, to look at the business world and to see that 87% of the CEOs are very concerned with the level of skills, of future-proof skills that they see in their staff. A lot of them, 45%, extremely concerned that they might not be able to get the skills they need for the business to function properly on the African continent. That's a concern. So we must recognize the urgency of future-proof, future-ready strategies at school in education. This is where we need to start preparing children for their future. It starts at school. Obviously, we also evoked the Matthew effect of COVID-19. By that, I mean that those who had now have more, and those who didn't have now had less, because of these different circumstances. 300 million children in Africa were left with no school to attend at all during last year's pandemic. And obviously, I'm not going to labor the point here. We know that only a minority of students had access to technology. And despite that, the solution that were offered most of the time were linked to technology, hence what I call the Matthew effect. There was also radio and television, TV, but these remain items of luxury for a lot of African families. However, remaining on the positive side and hopefully summarizing your discussions yesterday, we know that this has allowed ministries of education all over the continent to reassess their approach to education, to cater for distance education as well, and maybe find ways to cater for these children who cannot go to school so that the school can come to them. That is the ideal eventually for 100% attendance of children. So now that we've explored the territory, what about authenticity? Shouldn't we just focus on future employment? Why do you think that authenticity matters? I would like you to put your thinking cap on. First of all, could you let me read in the chat now what you consider, how would you define authenticity in education? Don't hesitate to use the chat function for this. Because I am sharing, I don't necessarily have access to the chat. So I am going to ask Ruth to just tell me what's coming in.
Ruth, I can help as well if you would like.
Yes, please. Can you do that?
Okay, and I'm Toby. Okay. Okay, so Dr. Hamilton has put authenticity in education. Christina put Christina Lux put reaching the learner where they are. Jennifer put thank you. Okay. Lisa Lockhart, using context familiar to children's home enrollments to teach skills. Pius Kumbu has put enshrine African education in African culture, making the use of African languages. Dr. Hamilton has put connecting individuals in ways that they can learn. Lisa Lockhart has put environment. Edward Bayo has put, and I'm probably saying that wrong, education that addresses the needs of the African society, our needs, enhancing African creativity. And then Mutete has put building on what children have. Yaya Dama has put authenticity is teaching what should be taught, but in African context is to take into account African culture. Okay, and then Shireen has put considering the multiplicity of voices and stories, respecting identities. Ty has put I fully concur with the principal Christina Lux, and Conrad has put being local. Dr. Denise Calhoun has put tapping into prior learning. Dr. Hamilton has put preparing individuals to function with competence in the context of where they live. Jonathan Halden has put an approach that resonates with the context of the learner and allows them to self-construct their understanding. Stephanie Walmsley has put in real life learning experiences that students can connect to their own context and society and find solutions for real life situations. And Maureen has put using the available resources to ensure that all learners have access to education. Michael Mumbo has put Afro-centric approach to facilitating teaching and learning. Edward Ambayo has put education that enhances thinking, local and acting global. Okay, Agawa Aduze has put in-depth knowledge of culture, language, etc. And that is all.
Super. Thank you so much. Bravo for such effectiveness. So what I hear here is a focus, first of all, on the cultural dimension of authenticity, Afrocentric, be it centered on ethnicity, indigeneity, but also with a kind of a Pan-African, proud political approach also to teaching. I hear also the pedagogical approach to authenticity, which is relevant to the student's context. So whatever definition we choose to adopt for the word authenticity, the question that we have now is the following. Is there a need for an authentic African education in our context? Is it really what is the most urgent? If you want to say yes and explain why, you can use the chat once more, and we will select maybe this time a couple of relevant responses. If you feel strongly that there is today a need for an authentic African education, and that should be our focus nearly above all other things, please write this in the chat. Obviously, we will explore the opposite viewpoint in a minute too. A few seconds.
Okay, Dr. Hamilton. I'm sorry, Dr. Hamilton has put the future of the world depends on women and men in Africa and successful education. There is crucial. And then Christina says, yes, much of what is taught is transactional and Eurocentric.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you for these viewpoints. So to summarize it, counterbalance the Eurocentric dimension of education, leveraging the beauty of Africa. I could not agree more with both points of view, but there are also maybe ways of counter these approaches. So no, you think that of chasing authenticity is not really the priority that we should have now. Please write in the chat and explain why. You are allowed to play the devil's advocate. So do we have any response?
Yes, sorry about that. Okay, so
Go ahead.
Taya said we must meet the needs of the least of these. And then Innocente said, yes, in Africa, especially Rwanda, there is a problem of students overpopulation in class. And there is 50%, 50 per teacher, and there is a need of authentic education.
Okay.
Yaya Adama also said, yes, there is a strong need for African authentic education because the curriculum that is being taught since years are really not taking into account the diversity and the richness of Africa. The center, the joy, and this is, I'm sorry, Shireen Ali Khan says the center the joy and lose the deficit power narrative. And then Ogagwa Duze says exact, yeah. Okay. And then Edward Ambayo says and I apologize, I'm probably saying that wrong, but it is absent, or we could talk of bringing the authentic African education to the fore, F-O-R-E, question mark. And then no one is playing devil's advocate. That's from
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I'm preaching to the choir here. It's okay. So there's still the question of why. I can see that no one went for the trap of the either or trap. You know, either we are practical and we focus on future-proof education, or we worry about the fluff of having Pan-African values in the curriculum. Obviously, we need both. So what does the scholars tell us about the importance of authentic African education? One of my favorite Cameroon researchers who works, I think, in the north of Cameroon, Blasius Chiato, and in Nigeria as well, in Nigerian universities, contributed to this book, Language, Literature, and Education in Cameroon. And one of my favorite quotes by him is, a culturally sensitive curriculum and medium of instruction render the learning environment friendly to learners, thus providing motivation to learn. We are motivated by relevant content and relevant context. So this is one of the most important reasons for me why we need authentic African education on the continent. Cultivating indigenous roots, that's Samboli Mosha, who says in The Heartbeat of Indigenous Africa, that I highly recommend, non-threatening and non-authoritative means like song, dance, rituals, stories, proverbs, very, very specific, I like this one, riddles, and whatever would make children learn in freedom and relaxation are used to implement indigenous education. Most of indigenous education takes place in everyday interactions of life, in teachable moments, and during specific transformation rites. So this is how there was school without walls before colonial schools were invented. It was all about teachable moments. It was all about contextualizing learning for the students and making it relevant to their everyday life. So it seems that we had that even before we were put in buildings and sat on benches to learn. And obviously we need authentic African education in the name of freedom, right? Education is one of the domains that evolves the slowest in the human experience. So these pictures of 19th century classrooms compared to 21st century classrooms, where the notebook or the copybook is simply replaced by a computer, by a desktop, by a laptop, in the same basic configuration, show us that things change slowly at school. And this Cameroonian researcher says, l'école africaine est et reste une institution coloniale. African schools education is and remains, a colonial institution. So it's time for us to change that through implementing authentic African education. So I'm going to take a pause here and ask anyone who would like to react to what we've covered so far to open their mics and make a comment.
And if I can just share, there's a comment from Dr. Archimedes and Ana Paula. The first question, yes, an inclusive education is one that makes the student feel part and immersed in the teaching and learning process. It is essential to maintain the authenticity and culture of each location.
Thank you. So yes, eyes on the prize, future employment, but the process is crucial. And obviously we have to talk about FFEA here if we are discussing education and freedom. This pedagogy makes oppression and its causes objects of reflection, the pedagogies of the oppressed. And from that reflection will come their necessary engagement in the struggle for their liberation. And in the struggle, this pedagogy will be made and remade. The reason why I have this slide here is because I think that authenticity needs to be mixed with Pan-African activism in today's African context. The reason why African education is in the states it is might be linked to a lack of self-belief in the importance of our own children. It might be linked to neo-colonial oppression. There might be many reasons why we are here today, but we need to, in order to change these dynamics, I think we need to have children, hands in heart, who want to build Africa, who are doing this not only for them, but also for the continent and for everybody. What hurdles do we have, really? The hurdles that we have in this endeavor, as you know, the number of languages, 2,000 to 2,500 languages officially on our continent. If everybody speaks their language at school, then we have a problem. We talked about the either or, so we're not going to insist on this right now. And globalization focuses us outwardly instead of inwardly. And this is a hurdle that you can see, for example, in the development of international education on the African continent. African international schools tend to really focus on university applications and a future outside of the country, sometimes at the expense of building the African continent for all of these children who are not going to leave, for all of these children who also need to see the continent prosper. So if I translate this, this quote by Cheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese thinker, the easiness with which we give up our culture is only explained by the fact that we don't really know it, and not because of some progressive posture we would be in. So renouncing your culture is a sign of ignorance rather than progressive thinking. Food for thought by Cheikh Anta Diop. So we're coming now to the meat of this presentation. We were in the why, and let's enter now the how. What are, in your opinion, the skills that we need to teach African learners if we are to be authentic and also future-proof? Where are we going to focus? I have some answers for you, but I would like to have yours first. What are the skills we need to teach African learners today? I hope the chat is working.
Yes, it is. There's some comments if you'd like me to Okay, so okay, I'm so saying that wrong. Agawa Duze says, I remember representing my school in cultural dance. It was a huge event, but sadly it is no longer emphasized as it used to. Authentic African learning needs to be revived. And then there was a comment earlier. I grew up in, the same person, I grew up in, to enjoy the program titled Tales by Moonlight, and it encompassed fables told in traditional form mixed with language. I looked forward to that program as a child, but in the 2 decades now, that program is no more. So sad. And then Ty has said the teaching of myriad technology tools.
Mm-hmm.
And then Yamadama says, Yaya Dama says, open-minded and proudness.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. And then Dr. Hamilton says, the how developing faculty with communication, that is a small prerequisite. And then Jonathan Halden, creative problem solving. And that's also far.
Thank you. Perfect. Creative problem solving. Very, very interesting skills. What I have, so to sum it up, we have the artistic, the importance of reconnecting with your roots through the arts. We have the importance of technology in this day and age. Should we explain why? No. African pride, communication, and problem solving. These skills would definitely feature in the presentations, the rest of the presentation that I'm about to complete for you. But before we move forward, I'd like you to think about the difference between skills and competences. Why? Because I'm about to talk to you about competencies, and I think that skills are very much linked to competencies. And let me explain to you, because we've already we need to move forward in the presentation, how I see it. You can say in the chat if I forgot something, if you agree or not. For me, a competence is at the juncture of knowledge, to know, a skill, the know-how, and attitude. It's a coming together of these 3 different pillars: what we know, what we've learned, the information that we have at our disposal, what we know how to do, the skills that we have developed. And all of this is wrapped up in a can-do attitude and flexibility that allows you to be effective in the implementation of your competence. Okay? So this is basically what I have for you today. I based my presentation on UNESCO's 2018 paper on global on curricular transformation, that are needed for future-proof education. So this part of the picture is really the UNESCO's work and the type of competences that they are looking at for the future-proof curriculum. And here on this side, it's created by the Transformation Society. They have embedded the Bloom's taxonomy to show that we are not relinquishing our good teaching practice, focusing on blooming before. Oh, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Focusing on the basic needs of the students, right? So moving on to talking about these different competencies. First of all, to survive in the world of today, we need lifelong learning, okay? We need not only to learn, but to be able to learn how to learn in the world of complexity and of where knowledge also becomes obsolete so fast. One of the best skills that we can give our students is lifelong learning. So these competencies are based on the following skills: curiosity, creativity, but also critical thinking. When I think of lifelong learning, the quote by Amadou Hampâté-Bâ comes to mind: every old man that dies is a library that burns. In African culture, we have this notion, very strong notion, that life is a journey where we accumulate knowledge. That's why we value our elders as a repository of the knowledge that they have accumulated throughout their lives. So what I want to do through the next slides is to show how these competencies already exist and are already revered in African cultures. So now I want you to just take a few minutes to think about lifelong learning activities, lifelong learning, educational tools that you are using in your schools, that you can think of. How do you promote, how do you support lifelong learning in your schools? Does someone have an example of how it's done in a typically African way? Curiosity, creativity, critical thinking. How can we develop this in a typically, authentically African way with African approaches? Do we have anything in the chat?
Okay, I'll go back a little bit. Also, Dr. Hamilton has put the paper, Future Competences 2017, in the chat, but I'll back up a little bit. Mary Ochiang says critical thinking was also something that was very important. So Payasa Kombo says we can use our 2,000 languages to learn better. If there are restrictions, children's rights are violated since they can't learn in the languages they master. Ruth said, yes, Lisa, asset-based views are local cultures. Stephanie Wamsey says, transdisciplinary skills, but these are needed to be taught globally in all the education systems in order to. Okay.
This is maybe defining the necessary skills, focusing on lifelong learning per se. Thank you so much for focusing on life learning skills and curiosity, creativity, critical thinking. I'm thinking, for example, about how we can use African proverbs in philosophy courses. Obviously, creativity. We discussed how it's important to have African arts embedded into the curriculum. I was discussing with a teacher of art in a recent training that I had, and she was saying that her students knew more about Picasso than about the local griots that they could meet around the corner. And curiosity is an interesting one. There are so many African tales that are actually asking you not to be too curious and to accept things that the elders tell you. But if you use, for example, African tales, you could actually develop curiosity by discussing what lessons do you think that tale has taught you. Encourage students to do research that compares African context with global context, for example, would be a way of developing lifelong learning in an authentic way.
Yes, Ogagwa Aduze says singing songs and telling stories using language, playing tradition games that enforces critical thinking. Yamadama also says promoting African local resources, for example, cotton. And then Shireen says philosophy, but looking at other Eurocentric epistemologies.
Okay, yeah, really, I think that the key word here is really philosophy, and the best philosophical resources that I can think of is really leveraging these African tales, these African proverbs, this wisdom in a way that encourages children to develop critical thinking at school. And curiosity, of course. There's so much to be learned about Africa, so much that they don't yet know. But let's try to make them curious about it in a way that grounds them as well as opens them up to the world. Self-agency I have as a second competence. And the skills involved are spirit of initiative, drive, motivation, endurance, grit, resilience, responsibility. These have got Africa written all over them. We tend to be, as Africans, the hustlers who are able to face any difficult situations. But we have to acknowledge that sometimes our communities and our societies are putting a lot of pressure on our children to be obedient or above everything else, to do what they are told. And obviously, I don't even talk about the issue of corporal punishment, of non-explained discipline. So if we really want to create to develop self-agency in children, maybe we want to keep our capacity for grit, resilience, and endurance, but maybe think a little bit more about putting the child at the center, if it's not already the case in our school, negotiating, discussing consequences for disciplinary situations, for example, going for restorative solutions in case of disciplinary issues. What did you do? Why do you think that was a problem? How can you fix it? Asking the students, the child to reflect about situations is part of, is I think something that African schools can grow from a lot. All schools can grow from. So yes, let's keep the grit and let's develop the children's voice within the school. And if we can, no more corporeal, if we can, we must. No more corporeal punishment, no more brutality. That is the thing that reduces the students' self-agency to a pulp. So yes, self-agency is obviously in our culture. I was hesitating before using this picture from a Maasai warrior. I was thinking, oh, killing a lion, do we need to be killing lions? But you see the symbol here of facing adversity with courage. Interactively using diverse tools and resources. When we see this competence, we obviously think about computers, about technology, and it's obviously very important. But how are we using them in an impactful way, in an efficient way, and in a responsible way? Probably much more on the African continent than anywhere else. I remember as a child learning how to wash the whole body with just this little bit of water in a bucket and being very clean afterwards. We look after our resources. We don't really waste, or maybe we waste a little bit more than we used to in the past. But here we are in the 21st century as pollution is developing, including in our continent, even though the more industrialized nations pollute more than us, as we want development. Can we help the students, the children, the learners think about the resources of our continent, why they are precious, and another way of thinking about development, of thinking about tourism, of thinking about their own consumption. This will save the continent and keep it the gem it is, the gem that everyone loves, the gems that everyone wants to possess. But let's nurture it. Let's nurture Africa, and let's teach children to do so at school. So this is an interesting way that is the talking drums. a way of using the communication from village to village in past centuries? Can we ensure that this type of know-how, of skills are not lost? Interacting with others. These are the competencies that UNESCO came up with that we need to teach to our students for them to face the skill gap, which is really ironic because these competencies have got Africa written all over it, and we're not always teaching them intentionally. Instead of that, we focus on content that might not help the students survive in Industry 4.0. So basically, I'm calling you to be even more African than you have been in the past, because all of these skills, all of these competencies are very, very African. Interacting with others is all about teamwork, about collaboration, negotiation. This is something that is ingrained in so many African cultures, as opposed to the more individualistic approaches that we have outside of the continent. We are all about minding the common good before our own interest. Maybe I'm romanticizing African spirit here. Maybe things have changed, but I think we can all reconnect with these ancestral values of community and collaboration. And some of us do it every day. This makes me very, very hungry for Chebujen. Interacting in and with the world is the next skill we're going to talk about. Being local, balancing rights and privileges, balancing freedom with respect. I'm sorry if you find these skills too simple, too obvious. They might be, but if you take a step back and think about them and their implication in the future of Africa, my message might be, what we need to change the education of the children is not necessarily what's the most complex and complicated. It's coming back to common sense and looking at what is needed to get work in the future. So this is my struggle. I live in a country that is part of the lung of the planet, and this is what happens to our pygmy people, to our people in the forest, and no one seems really to care. So as educators, we have to turn our children towards the importance of our resources, because if we lose them, the whole world loses. And at the moment, the deforestation in Cameroon and in Africa is drastic and needs to be part of what we teach our students at school. So now that we have discussed some of these skills, I would like you to just take a few minutes to a few seconds to write in the chat what you think so far the most important competence that I've presented has been and why. Let's take a bit of time to share. What is the most important competence so far for you? So I'm listening.
Would you like me to read the chat?
If okay with you, Toby.
Okay. Okay. So Stephanie Wamsley has put, it brings us to a capability model for social justice to ensuring that we have agency for students whilst keeping them safe in their social context in regards to their education. Dr. Hamilton has said that they are simple but deep and far from trivial to operationalize and to live.
Yes.
And then Jennifer said that thank you for that point, Michael. And then Dr. Hamilton has said, and lifelong learning may be most important for me.
Thank you. Oh yes, lifelong learning might be encompassing all of these different competencies. Thank you. So now this might be a little bit fancier and and more difficult to implement in the schools the way they organize right now. But transdisciplinary is really important. It's about STEM, the humanities, geography, history, economics working together, and social science as a whole tend to be very transdisciplinary. So this approach of having, these different copybooks for each subject and never have them meeting each other, this is very much a thing, should be very much a thing of the past. A way to revolutionize our African schools would be for teachers to talk more with each other, to come up with projects that help students understand that subjects are not that separate in real life. In a situation like COVID-19 crisis, we see that social sciences have to work with sciences, and even the arts have to come up with a solution on how to continue entertaining us through technology. So the real world is transdisciplinary, and our school should be transdisciplinary too. Like STEM. For me, this is an example of STEM, of course. Can you tell me why? Why do you see transdisciplinary in this picture? How, as teachers, can you use this picture in a transdisciplinary way? I know there are quite a few teachers in the audience. So what does the chat say, Toby?
Okay, so we have Maureen says being open-minded, interacting with others through teamwork and collaboration. Christina says geometry, language, art, and then some of the other disciplinaries they were mentioning. Self-agency came up a lot. Also, Maureen says being open-minded. I think of it working. Interacting with others through teamwork and collaboration. And then a lot of comments about self-agency, interacting with the world, and a stress on self-agency. Shireen says civilizations, geometry, etc. Lisa says history, tech. Mary says geometry, history. Jennifer says engineering, architecture, religion, politics. Israel Ramirez says civilization. Inocente says math, art. Archimedes and Ana Paula said lifelong learning leads to disruptive education. And that's
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm asking the African teachers sitting here, how many transdisciplinary projects you are, where your subjects come together to push students' thinking and reflection in combining different subjects for a common assessment goal. So this will be the last one, multiliterateness, reading, writing. We should have started there, you think? But we end there, and I think it's interesting because obviously literacy, numeracy has evolved today to include digital artistic skills as well. And our schools only places where we learn how to read and write and use a computer, even sing and dance. Why don't we see this at school? That is so cool. That is so beautiful. And this is a genuine skill that a lot of people will gain from developing. And it even leads to jobs, So even in the rural areas where children have to leave the field sometimes to come into the classroom, and teachers have to negotiate with parents, why don't we change the fields into the classroom? Okay, so this is definitely about teaching students where they are in the context they exist. This will help them develop entrepreneurially according to the needs of where they are, and to not negate who they are to fulfill the needs of some multinationals. No, they would be fulfilling their own needs, always being grounded in the needs of Africa. So to sum it up, we have to remember that languages matter. We have talked about them. We didn't really come up with solutions to include language into African languages into the teaching. We have several ways of doing this. It's like another presentation. But is it through teaching Swahili in the curriculum, allowing translanguaging, translating authors from different African languages into a language that is accessible for everybody, opening up African indigenous language days. I want to say mother tongue days or mother tongue weeks. There are different ways of highlighting the importance of language, and it matters. Teaching all of these competencies that I will definitely send to you so that you have the list, but also assess them as part of what the students need to grow in. They are more than symbolic. Exploring the world of African references, African roots, global wings. We're not trying to say that an authentic African education is one that focuses students only on Africa, but the idea is to open up to the world while retaining their Africanness. So this is how my organization, Africa Learning International, tries to help in this domain. We have online and face-to-face teacher professional development that always includes African thinking, cultural responsiveness, inclusion, including cultural inclusion. We have conferences as well. I hope you're going to be attending, those of you who are present here, where teachers, history teachers, or arts teachers can share how they work and how they Africanize their curriculum. We have a master teacher program for vulnerable schools where gifted teachers help other teachers or teachers from less vulnerable, better established school support rural and more disadvantaged teachers. So this is one of our projects. We also are creating a teacher library in Yaoundé because we have noticed that there are so few textbooks on the continent, and in my country, 14 students share one textbook statistically. So that's a real problem that we need to solve. So we do need educators and volunteers to join us in this work. And this is where you can reach out to us, info@africalearninginternational.com, and this is our website. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready for questions. Is there any? Thank you.
Well, can we first just give Estelle a round of applause? That was so rich and deep and such valuable resources. And we do have time for a few questions. If anyone would like to just unmute and or put in the chat.
Could I ask a question?
This is Mutechi. For me, it's really not a question, but just a reassurance that we have people like you out there that are doing some good work. That is, I mean, for me, I'm sitting down here in Los Angeles, and I'm just thinking, what you and your organization is actually doing out there for people, and for me, I'm just so grateful and very encouraged. And I don't even know what to say, but thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Estelle, can I ask you a question? Can you hear me okay? Great presentation. I loved all the work on competencies, skills, and knowledge, how that all hangs together. One skill that I'm really interested in, and I haven't heard it mentioned today, is leadership for young people. Is that something that you would value?
That's really interesting. It wasn't there, and in the set of competencies listed by UNESCO. I think leadership is important, but for me personally, I think it's more important for all of our students, all of our learners, to find their place. Not everybody is a leader, and it's okay, but we need to create an environment where all sets of skills are equally valued and where people have agency. I think I would call that a form of leadership, but not leadership in the sense of dominating other people and sorting them out, but self-leadership. I think it's crucial for me.
Thank you. And ethical and moral leadership, I think, is the other point to put into what you've just said in terms of clarifying, not for self-gain, not for monetary reward, but again, leadership with regard to cooperation and teamwork. I think that's really important.
Yes, totally. Thank you so much for highlighting that.
Thank you.
Estelle, I have a question. This is Christina Lux. What are your thoughts on trade schools for students who maybe are falling out of the traditional schooling system?
I think that they are wonderful, depending on how well equipped they are. I'm here sitting in Switzerland where this type of schools, apprentissage, it's called here, apprenticeship, are not at all the exception, and not necessarily catering for students who are not academically enough. The idea that academic skills are to be developed more focused on by students who have a passion for academia in this way, and looking at a career that makes sense for them to carry in that direction, and sending other students to find what trades they would like to learn about. I think if we look at the example of Switzerland, a very successful country, I think it's definitely a route to explore. With the skill gaps as well, I think that we need more and more people who master a trade, but maybe together with the necessarily entrepreneurial skills that would allow them to create their own business and thrive.
Thank you.
Ubuntu, absolutely.
Any
I
other
raised my hand to speak. Yes, I raised my hand.
Go ahead.
So
please.
here is Yaya. Yes, I really want to thank Mrs. Hicks for the brilliant presentation that she did. We always learn with her. So one of the things I would like to add presentation, you talk a little bit about SDGs. I want to mention that one of the things which is really encouraging is that now more, taking into account their own strength, because one of the weaknesses of African is that we don't trust ourselves a lot. But more and more, we can see that African youth are really working to find African solutions to their own problems, because we are always thinking that African solutions will come from elsewhere, like from Western countries or out of Africa. But now more and more African young people are really working, engaged in the implementation of the SDGs, and that is something I'm really proud of, and I think so we have to continue, and the future is promising. Thank you.
Yaya, you are an example of all the work that you're doing in Burkina Faso to make students aware of the importance of their political engagement, their responsibility in civil society. So the thank you goes right back to you, Yaya. I think it's a very exciting period to be African today. There is much more self-belief, And I don't know, the example of Nollywood, it speaks volumes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay, go ahead. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody who attended, and I'm giving the mic back to Ruth.
Thank you so much, Estelle. Estelle, let's give Estelle another hand. Wow. I have never been so enriched by a presentation that had to do connect, like connecting the culture and really speaking to the African culture. I think this is the dream, right? This is the dream for having this forum that focuses on Africa, because these are the things that the world doesn't know. These are the things that the world doesn't hear about. And even me, I would not have made the connections between, what about the talking drum? How do I implement the talking drums into a curriculum? I think the talking drums are cool. It's a great cultural heritage, but mind-blowing to see how you can play that all into a curriculum without completely changing everything that is going on right now. So for me, it has taken away the myth of having a Pan-African curriculum, because there was always that gap between how do I connect the West and Africa or the East? How do I connect those two? So that gap has kind of slowly been bridged by your presentation. And for that, I want to thank you. You put in a lot of work. We were worried that you will not have content to fill out our hour, but maybe we can go for another hour. So thank you. This was very rich. And thank you to everybody that attended. Thank you so much. With the political climate in the United States, we almost did not set this forum right as we did today, but I'm glad we did. This is very enriching, and it's nice to have something else going on globally that just being tied to the news and watching to see who is going to be president. I hope we have that resolved, but until then, let's reflect on what we've learned today. We will share out resources as we get them, and send out a video clips as the parts that we recorded. We look forward to the next one. And if you know anybody that you think we should have speak, please let us know, suggest people. We are all collaborating together. We are all doing this together. So let's work together here and continue to feed ourselves and continue to grow, right? Like, let's become the old people, the old libraries, so that when we go, they would say, the library is gone, but let's pass it on also. Thank you so much. Jennifer, anything?
No, just thank you. And we look forward to the next conversation. Thank you, Estelle.
Dr. Hamilton, anything?
Okay.
I just noticing, I've been doing a little bit of back channel chatting, including to the whole group. And I hope and think that there have been a lot of connections that people are making. I know Ruth, you and Jennifer will follow up, but we also like to hear how people are connecting with one another. And I hope the forum that you've put together and for example, that Estelle has brought so much richness to is a way that we all can come alongside one another in realizing and chasing these dreams. So Ruth, Jennifer, thank you so much for organizing, and Estelle, thank you for being our featured and wonderful presenter today.
Sure.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you, like Dr. Hamilton said, if there's somebody you want to connect with that we can help, that will connect you, just let us know. We have a list of people that are collaborating. And if you have any successful story connecting outside of here, also let us know so we can share it, because we want to encourage each other to connect. And we also want to know that the work we're doing is actually impacting you, is impacting other people, is impacting lives. Thank you so much. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Ruth.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.